I have something a little bit different for you this week. I have been thinking a lot about the men in our world, and having two boys of my own, it is one of my passions to help influence a world where it's safe for men to have emotions, where it's safe for anyone actually to have and experience their emotions. And I feel so incredibly fortunate to be surrounded by some really incredible, brave, strong, loving men who have a slight different view on things. And this podcast is I dedicate it to working mums. But as a working mum, as a woman in this world, I think it can be incredibly insightful to have an understanding of life from a male perspective. So I'm going to be doing a series of interviews with some of the gorgeous men in my life. Um, and I'm going to be sharing with just drip feeding them throughout my podcast episodes. It's my intention for all of us to create a world where it is safe for any person, any human on our planet to have and experience their emotions. Because when we do that, we are so much stronger, so much more resilient than when we try and hide them away, avoid them, or or try not to feel them. So, with that in mind, here's one of the episodes. So, welcome to this week's podcast. And I'm a little bit nervous about this actually, because I have a guest with me today who I consider to be such an incredible man. And I have been very fortunate to have been exposed to this person through my husband. And I just love hearing the two of them talk about love and fear and their children and their partners in and like being scared and all the things that I just think more women need to expose to. So no pressure, Ron, but welcome
Mhm.
to my podcast.
Thank you very much.
Do
It's
you want
lovely to
to
be here.
Thank you. So what actually initiated this is I've never had we've never coached, have we? You coached me
No.
once. I've never actually coached you.
Yeah.
But maybe you can tell us your story in just a second. But you sent me the most incredible voice message. Do you mind me sharing this?
No, of course not. Go
Okay,
for
cool.
it.
So you sent me the most incredible voice message thanking me for telling you how much I loved you. And it was just, it's kind of why I do what I do and why I feel that one of my unique talents is to actually communicate from love. So, do you want to start by saying, like, what g- what got you here? Bearing in mind we do only have 50 minutes.
That's easy. Your invitation. Yeah, no, thanks for that lovely introduction. It's really special. I can feel that emotion. It really lands when you say that. So it's lovely to be able to receive that and hear that it's been received as well. Um, so yeah. So I guess that our connection really is Johnny, your
Mm.
husband. We went to school together.
Mhm.
And we went to the college together and we ended up joining the Royal Marines together. And at that stage, more or less, when John left, he started dating you, and that's when we met. So we're talking well over 20.
Yeah,
Well, let's have a quick calculation. Yeah,
maybe even
25,
yeah, easily.
25 years ago now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
um, yeah. And so obviously I've known you for that period of time. I stayed in the Royal Marines. John went off to join the police force. I had a career in the military. I did 10 years in total, 5 in the Royal Marines, 5 years in the Special Forces. And I went into private security work and then transitioned away after I started to have a young family and realized I don't want to be away from the people that I love in these sorts of environments anymore.
Mhm.
So I started to transition away, got into personal training and coaching. And at this point is when Johnny reached out to me, who was starting his own coaching journey with the connection being you, and asked, would I be open for him practicing his coaching skills on me?
Yeah.
Having known a little bit about what coaching was, I was very keen to explore that. And I think I went head on in. I didn't really hold back, and through John's help, I really uncovered some incredible things about myself, and I got to see the world in a completely different light. And that leads me to here today to run my own little coaching business and lots of other little projects, which I'm learning and managing as we go. Um, and yeah, in the summer I got married to my wife, Naria, who I've been with for 20 years. And on that day after the wedding, when everybody came back from the restaurant and we came back to our house, yeah, you looked me in the eyes. I'm not sure if you held my chin or not, but yeah, and just looked me square in the eyes and told me you loved me. And it really landed, albeit 2 or 3 weeks later.
Mm.
And so yeah, it's really special to be able to receive that. And yeah, I'm very, as you know, as I said in our wedding day, I'm really grateful to both of you for being in my life, for the catalyst that both of you are for so many things. And I think what's beautiful about that is just the knock-on effects through
Mm.
clients, friends, our kids. So yeah, I'm very, very grateful and humbled to be sat here chatting to you
Yeah,
today, Nikki. Thank you.
thank you. So, what I think fascinates me about you and Johnny, and I suppose probably other men in what is perceived to be, or your role in the military, very masculine, typically masculine roles, aren't they? They're fighting and they're the kind of the aggression, and yet you clearly have a very soft, loving, nurturing side to you. And I'm curious to hear how those, if there's a confliction, what has been your experience as a man growing up in this world where we tell a lot of boys to man up,
Yeah.
having been through that military experience to now? Like, what do you think? What is your opinion on on your emotions, on fear, on love?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. So I think I'd go back to, yeah, generally the military is perceived as very masculine and aggressive. And I think at certain specific moments in time it needs to be for the role it has. But I don't think that's necessarily just a job for men. There's a certain attitude or way to do things. And I'm obviously talking quite critical moments, so we don't really have to go into that. And so
Yeah.
you can kind of understand. I also think it generally recruits and gives a lot of people a place of belonging. Sometimes that comes from a wide um, variety of backgrounds, diverse backgrounds and experiences, but they're often like poor, broken boys find their place in the world there, and the military kind of helps them give a sense of that. So it plays into that. And for me, again, so if my own personal experiences, I come to realize recently, I recognized myself as I was different, but I never knew that until recently that was okay. And I think for me, what that really means is that I was a sensitive lad, which again, I would still makes me cringe a little bit because I assumed that I would be weak, but it's not really weakness. It's just my ability to pick up on literally sights, sounds, emotions, words, before other people might. It doesn't make me any better, any worse. It just, I can sense something, I'll move away, or I
Mm.
know something's coming, um, and move towards it. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. So I've misunderstood my sensitivity to that, and it's only through coaching and peeling back the layers that I've began to understand myself
Mm.
really, and all those sorts of complicated layers. And I think since, yeah, so definitely since summer, my wedding, getting forced, not forced, but having the kids have so long off on summer holidays here, 12 weeks. Yeah, almost forced to slow down. It's helped me become really pleasant, present and pleasant.
Yeah.
And realizing that I need to be more me.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? We'll come on to that, I guess. But yeah, and so it's a deeper connection with myself, and that for me is love. I've always been loved. I come from a loving, supporting family, but I've never really until recently learned to love myself. So my relationship with emotions is still very new. I get nervous before speaking to you, but I also know that fear, that edge is cool. I've got something to learn about myself, or I'll enjoy this conversation between us. And if somebody else listens to it and gets benefit, then great. So my emotions, I'm discovering them all the time.
Mm.
Um, um, yeah, just part of life. It's nothing for me to run from now. And I still have help understanding them, processing them, because after all, we are only human. So
Yeah. And I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Like men and women have exactly the same range of emotions, amount of emotions, depth of emotions. And yet, men generally, if they're sensitive to those emotions, they're seen as weak, like sensitive being a negative connotation,
yes.
weak, and as a weakness.
Hmm.
What
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. And so if I go to man up, yeah, I've probably heard that at school. I probably heard it at home, but throwaway comments, you know.
Yeah.
And so my interpretation of that and of the world was trying to do big and difficult and challenging things to prove myself to the world,
Mm.
especially after failing most of my exams. And even then, I say it, I didn't really fail them. I just didn't get the grades I needed to carry on, um, or as anticipated. So yeah, it helped form a certain perspective of how I had to be in the world and where my place was. So it's uh, I'm only just finding that now, like I say, and every day's a school day. It really is. And your question there about, which has just slightly eludes me, but yeah, manning up. I guess what I used to do is run from emotions, or if I so I think the biggest one for me was anger and slash frustration. And
Mm.
because I was so a physical lad in the sense of I like to train or do sports, that's how I used to get my outlet. But it would never help me manage it. It would just like push that do I even call it a problem? It would push that issue just to the side. So
Mm.
I'd never really learn from it, or I'd never really address it. It'd just be pushed down, literally down, ready to explode back up at something else, at the smallest of triggers, at the somebody cutting me off in the car, my kids chatting back to me, my wife telling me something that I don't want to hear, all that good stuff. Wow,
Mm.
that it would be fear that would bomb it back up because I didn't know how to process my anger. I didn't know
Mm.
where it's coming from.
And do you think what I've noticed in a lot of men is that, and this happens with women as well, but you go to anger and frustration because it's a protective mechanism.
Yeah.
So underneath that, what do you think the fear is?
Yeah, so I think it was. Yeah, this is really interesting because once upon a time I would have told you like that, and now I just have to double check because that sort of like belief of I'm not good enough, it's
Mm.
not there. It's very, very subtle and it's a lot, it's disguised. So, what was that fear you asked? So, I'm going to just pause for a second and check
Yeah.
in. Yeah, along the lines of I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, or I'm not loved, or not lovable. Is it
Mm.
something around that acceptance of myself? Really, yeah, yeah, in and around that.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you said that I'm not good enough. Like that was kind of your initial fear. I'm not good enough. Do you think a lot of men feel that way?
probably, yeah, and I can understand why because we're not. We assume that the things we do is who we are. And
Tell us more
for
about
me, I've
that.
learned to separate that a bit. So I'm
Okay.
not any better or worse because I've done things that are seemed as incredible, like being in the special forces or Iron Man. But I'm no worse if I've done things like lied and cheated and stolen. You know, I'm not
Mm.
physically attached to those things. And I think the interesting thing for me though is that it doesn't feel any better when those sort of things happen or I make mistakes or but I'm aware of what's causing them
Mm.
and how to buy myself sometimes so I don't get wrapped in that story. And I think that's my phrase of the month at the moment. Just watch the
Mm.
story. Watch the
Yeah.
story. What am I telling myself about this?
Well, it kind of gives you a chance to pause then, doesn't it? It's like, right, hang on a minute. You probably feel the frustration or the anger first of all, and it's
100%.
like, right, okay, I'm just going to pause. What is actually happening internally for me? Oh, okay, there's that I'm not good enough or some fear underlying.
Yeah.
And then it's actually then choosing, isn't it? Do I want to continue down the path of reacting to this anger or frustration, or am I going to choose something different.
Yeah, 100%. And then talking about that, just exploring that, and really, and a lot of times for me, I need help to do that
Mm.
because these sorts of traits are so ingrained, and I've had 40 years of good practice of hiding that, or
Yeah.
avoiding it. So yeah, somebody to hold that space like a coach or a really good friend that's not going to be judgmental, that's going to be objectively asking me questions about that to help me. Um, it's been so beneficial and something that I, yeah, would recommend to people really. And just a real quick example, I've got hundreds, but one that has happened to me recently is, so my daughter Liz, she come back from gymnastics training late on a Thursday evening. My wife was working in the hospital, so I was putting the kids to bed myself, as I do quite a few times um, a week on my own. It's no big deal. It's done it loads of times, and she was really tired. She'd struggled with dinner. I could feel this sense of frustration and anger rising. I managed it. It's okay. It's okay. We've got this. Walked away, came back, walked away, came back, asked her to go to bed, did the washing up. My boy had already showered and was in bed reading. Um, and I knew that the next day she had gymnastics practice and she struggles to get up after because she's so tired. Um,
Mm.
and she was upstairs and she hadn't done anything to get ready when I'd finished the washing up. I went upstairs and she was led there on my bed, rolling around on the point of having a tantrum. And I caught myself with my fist raised and about to slam it down onto the mattress. And I caught it. I was I was trying to scare her into doing what I wanted her to do,
Mm.
which is a horrible thing to catch myself doing. But I think again, I managed to catch that. I saw the fear in her eye and withdrew, literally walked out the room. And I was like, ah, shit. I suddenly realized this is nothing to do with her. She's not listening to me. When I don't feel heard, I assume I'm not loved.
Yes.
That is not the truth in this situation. And it almost makes me emotional to talk about now.
Yeah.
There's a tired little 8-year-old girl who just needs her dad's support.
Mm.
And so I went back and yeah, I caught it. Lots of times I don't, but it's just a tiny example of having the help to catch it, change that perspective. It's nothing to do with her. It's all about me. I can talk
Mm.
to lots of people about this tomorrow, the next day, the next week.
Yeah.
What's really going on for me?
Yeah. That's incredible. So what did you end up doing instead?
Um, what did I end up doing? Yeah, I probably went back downstairs again just so I need to take a few more deep breaths, physically remove myself, and
Mm.
then go up. And so if she, I don't think she wanted to brush her teeth and put her pajamas on. So I was like, I didn't say this, but like, fuck it, don't brush your teeth, don't put your pajamas on. Love, it's
Yeah.
okay. There's no
Yeah.
story tonight. It's really late. You need to get to bed. You've got school and gymnastics tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so it took a
Yeah.
while, but the energy, my approach, both physically and emotionally towards that situation was completely different. But 2 seconds before, it was anger, frustration. She's disobeying me. She doesn't respect me. I'm a rubbish dad,
Mm.
and all this story. And then 10 seconds later, it was or whatever it was. It's oh no, this looks a bit different,
Yeah.
which is probably more true.
Mm.
And I know from my experience when there's so many layers of story, it's probably not that because it's just that a story.
Yeah.
So just one example, and I still make mistakes and I still lose my temper and stuff like that. But it's just a tiny example of being able to catch it, process it, and literally physically do something different in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that our goal as especially as parents is not to be perfect all of the time. Like we are
No.
humans. We are emotional creatures. We are not going to be perfect at this and neither should we be. And if we are, it's probably not authentic and
Yeah, yeah.
real. It's
Well, let's
probably a
have a chat. Let's
false.
have a chat in 20 years' time. Let's see if it really is perfect. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, my fear there then was I'm not a good dad. That's you know
Yes.
what I mean? It's like I'm not
Yeah.
a good dad, which
Yeah.
again isn't true.
Well, and it's fascinating, isn't it? Because when we act from that anger and frustration, fueled by this fear of not being a good dad, we end up, if you would have carried on down that path, which I have done, many times, we shout, we shame, we get angry, we fear them into action. Then on reflection, then we beat ourselves up because that is not the type of parent we want to be.
Yeah,
It's not.
exactly.
So then
Yeah.
So I'm not a good dad ends up you not being a good dad because you're not showing up in the way that you authentically want to
Yeah,
show up. Because
exactly.
ultimately, the deepest truth is that you love your children
Yeah, yeah, massively.
and they need to get into bed sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. And I love myself. So
Yes.
that I recognize that this is about my relationship with me.
Yeah.
So the thing that came up for me a lot was I need to love myself more. And once upon a time, I used to really beat myself up, and I would have done about that. It used to feel like a sledgehammer, like hitting me in the side of the head, quite obvious. Whereas now it's really subtle. I think
Mm.
it's really subtle. Um, so being more present and being more authentic is really, yeah, that's what I connect it. It's not about pampering myself, love. It's about accepting myself for who I am.
Mm.
Just like we came before we touched on there, accepting the highs and the lows, the wins and the losses, the good,
Yeah.
the bad, the positive, the negative, whatever, the highs, the lows. It is what it is. How can I move on? What's the
Yeah.
next step? So yeah.
So if there was a I want to come back to the loving yourself more, but if there was a wife that's listening to this and thinking, "Oh my gosh, you it's just like I'm hearing my husband with the anger and the frustration and the shouting." How could she approach this in a way to her husband that wouldn't necessarily make him go, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Good question. Um, I think so. If I don't know, but if I imagine myself going through that, I think it would be. I feel most connected and supported when exactly that my wife says to me, either in the moment, not saying anything to let me get it out, rather than adding another like layer of resistance there and making me feel bad about what I've done. It would be some sort of gentle contact just to remind me that somebody's there without saying anything. And I think it would be along the lines of, which she does a lot more, since we've talked about these sorts of things, is how can I support you? What do you need from me?
Hmm.
Or shall I take over?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a really subtle, really, really subtle. I don't, especially men. Yeah, I don't like to be told when I'm right and wrong. I think I like to come to that conclusion myself. So have another opinion isn't probably that helpful in
Mm.
that moment.
Mm. And you said earlier the this realization that when you think you're not being heard, you equate that to not being loved.
Yeah,
And I mean, we know this as coaches, but one of the most powerful things that you can give someone is just a listening silence.
yeah,
And
space.
I know for Johnny, when he's scared and when he's freaking out and when his brain is giving him, we're all going to fucking die and our house is going to burn down and we're going to be on the streets and we're not going to have any money. I don't try and change him in that moment. I literally just listen. I don't give my opinion. I don't make it mean anything about me. I just listen.
Mm,
And so it's interesting you say, if I'm not heard, I'm not loved. Sometimes all we need to do is just give someone silence and be there for them.
yeah, yeah. No, massively. Yeah, massively. So that's where that sort of gentle hand, or that acknowledgement of presence comes from, I think, for me personally. And yeah, when things have settled down, a real gentle question. Yeah, how
Yeah.
can I support you? And it's really interesting actually, because my 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 mum especially, but both my parents, like I said, are really loving and supportive. And so I had the feeling this came from childhood. So I spoke to my parents about this. I spoke to my parents about this, which was really uncomfortable,
Yeah.
really uncomfortable. Um, but yeah, I just felt that it was something that I could communicate to them. Um, there's no blame on judgment or on them whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I just wanted them to let them know that sometimes as a kid, I didn't feel heard. I assume I wasn't loved. But I know again that a lot of that story, um, I know that's not true. We had a lovely conversation, and yeah, I probably grew in love through that tough conversation and those realizations.
Yeah. So has it changed how you now parent your two?
In what way?
In how how you're able, like, do you find yourself being more present with them? Do you find yourself listening to them? Do you find yourself like telling them you love them more? Like, have you noticed a difference?
Yeah, probably not noticed, but I definitely recognize those things that you've said. It's not something I have to try and force. It
Mm.
is something that I, like you said, I let it flow. So um, I think one of the most important things for me is to remind them that they're loved, especially when they're feeling down or sad or had an accident or they've been told off. I think that that's the most important time that I hold very close to remind them is this isn't them. It's just a situation, and they are still loved. It's just the thing that they've done that I don't really like. It's not them. So I'm
Yeah,
very very clear about that. But I do recognize that I tell them a lot that I love them. And for me, it all comes back to me. The responsibility is mine. So I work really hard on myself, knowing that who I need to be flows from that. What I need to do, sorry, flows from that. And again, with my wife, we do couples counseling, and we've been together 20 years, only just married, but I was trying to make a joke about living in sin there, but
if Johnny was here, he would come up with
oh,
something,
he
but
would, yeah.
yeah, I'm not as quick as he is.
Um, so yeah, I own that. That's up to me to manage. I don't like that word, but do you know what I mean? So what can I do? What can I change about me and
Mm,
my relationship with myself? It flows from there.
mm.
So when I'm open and honest and can communicate my frustrations, fears, hopes, disappointments, highs and lows, then I'm a lot more, like you said earlier, the word that authentic with my kids, which I know is loving for me.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I think just real quickly, my whole point of me leaning into discomfort and exploring all that sorts of things is so that I can set an example for my kids and hopefully put out two more courageous, compassionate little people in the world. And
Yeah,
if that knocks on, what would that look like? So that's it's not always easy, it's not always comfortable, but that's what helps me lean into my edge, my discomfort.
yeah.
Yeah, for
I
them.
love Brené Brown's quote. When I heard it, I can't remember what book it was, but I heard it on Audible. It literally stopped me in my tracks. And she said, as a parent, she was talking about leaders as well, but as a parent, we have to be the adult we want our children to become.
Yeah,
So especially with boys, particularly my passion because I have two of them. If I want them to be grounded, if I want them to be okay feeling nervous, if I want them to know that self-doubt isn't a sign to stop, it's a sign to move forward, if I want them to know that anxiety isn't a problem, that has to start with me and me
yeah.
being okay feeling nervous, anxious, self-doubt, and me being okay feeling uncomfortable, expressing my vulnerabilities and expressing my love, that then influences them to do the same.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And it's a process, isn't it? I don't think you turn up and do a week's worth of work and everything's fine. It's a continuous journey. And
Yeah,
something that I heard that really stuck with me is the ability to converse as a family. And it's a habit that I've started. We don't always do it, but it really annoys my kids. But it's also really interesting that they love it and sometimes prompt me when I forget. Is at the
yeah,
dinner table asking three questions. What's the best bit of your day?
yeah,
What didn't go that well for you today? And what did you learn? Or a
yeah,
challenge, yeah.
yeah,
Best bit, challenge. What did you learn? Or
yeah,
variations. It's incredible some of the little things they say, but just there, so it gives me an opportunity to say, well, I messed up at work today. I told a half truth because I was scared, and I'm feeling really anxious about the conversation that I've got with this person tomorrow.
yeah,
Just a gentle little hand from my son, those sorts of things. I don't need that, but it
yeah,
shows me that he's connected to that. And just like you said there, I'm modeling the behavior. I like to think, again, I'm human, I make mistakes, it doesn't always
of
happen,
course.
but
Yeah,
that I would like them to adopt,
yeah,
yeah, I'm walking the walk.
yeah. It was fascinating. I was away recently at a retreat and I met a woman there who coached the wives, Catholic wives, on their husband's pornography addiction.
Wow.
And I was talking to her about pornography, and I was like, how do I even start this conversation with two teenagers? And she
Yeah.
went, well, just start with how like you met me. So I came back and I was like, this is a conversation that I feel like I want to have with my children,
Yeah.
but I'm uncomfortable. So sure as hell they're going to be uncomfortable. But it was actually really interesting because I was willing to lean into that discomfort and and they both took it very well. We had a really interesting conversation around like pornography and um you know proper relationships and things like that. And clearly at some point they're gonna get into pornography. They're boys, who doesn't? But it just from my perspective, I was like, if I'm willing to be uncomfortable talking about a subject, whatever subject it is, then hopefully that's going to influence them to be uncomfortable coming to me to talk about a subject, whatever
Yeah.
that is. And ultimately that's all I really ever want is them to be able to know that they can get help and support from wherever they need to. And discomfort is probably going to come along for that journey.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that, and that's so. I think it's so important to be able to start initiate those conversations, isn't it? And
Yeah.
for me, that really comes back to this is where we get to that point that I love myself enough to know that this doesn't have to be perfect because that's what
Yes.
it used to be for me. I have to be perfect, or it has to be presented the right way, or I have to get 9 out of 10, otherwise it's a failure. All those sorts of things. I just have to be willing to start because I love myself enough that it's not about the result.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that goes for conversations, it goes for relationships, it goes for arguments with our kids, with our colleagues, awkward conversations with clients, all of it.
Mm.
That's why for me that foundation is grown or and is growing because it's love, the
Yeah.
ability to accept myself, even though I might go completely red when talking about pornography
Yeah.
or completely trip over my tongue because it is so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my relationship with myself.
So I'm curious, how does love feel in your body?
That's a good question. Yeah, so if I sit with that just now, it feels it's in and around my heart and it's warm and it's love. It's glowing and it's growing as well. It's expansive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you have been able to describe that like before you did this work on yourself?
No, 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 no. And something's coming to me about the love. Yeah, okay, it will come back to me. There's something interesting coming to me there about, but yeah, would I've known? There's no way I would have
Yeah.
known. I'm not even sure what I'd have said. There you
Mm.
go. I think for me, I also though can think that love isn't just a feeling; it's action. It is a verb to love. So
Mm.
there's certain things that I do for myself, for my family. And I know I can just hear John's do things to yourself, to your love. Not like
We
that,
go
John.
back to the yeah,
Yeah.
the closed doors, pornography,
Just talking
tissues,
about where you
all the
not like
rest.
that, John. Because I love myself. So, for example, the drink thing, I know we've talked about this in the past, is I love myself enough to say no to drink
As in
because,
alcohol, you mean?
yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
alcohol, because I've made a choice that I value my health or my position on it more than I do other people's opinions or banter or pressure to drink. As a tiny example, but
Yeah.
that could go for sleep, that could go for the type of conversations I engage in, type of websites I go on,
Yeah.
what I put in my body, my routines with exercise,
Yeah.
uncomfortable truths to tell clients. Yeah, so I think there's an act side to it as well, not just a warm fuzzy feeling.
Mm.
It's maybe for me, but maybe for other men as well. It's
Yeah.
not just all airy fairy.
But I think that's really key, isn't it? Like when I think of the word love, I think of the universal light, love, and energy that we are all exposed to if we open ourselves up to it. Which I have recently, we tapped on this just before we started recording. I have recently packaged that up as the word God. Doesn't have an attachment to a religion or any kind of hierarchical structure. But to me, just that love to me is just that universal energy, that warmth, that support that we have in all of us if we learn to notice it and receive it.
Yeah.
But I think society see love as sex, relationships, and so then of course it's going to be like, this is weird. And I work with a local business, heavily male dominated engineering business, and I'm there like, right, let's talk about love. And you can see people, just especially the men, are kind of like, oh God, this is uncomfortable,
Mm.
because it's not really a terminology unless you've been exposed to that maybe through a religion. And a really good friend of mine said to me, which is kind of what started my labeling of God, I suppose, is she said to me, Nikki, I don't think you realize how loved you are. She said, I know Johnny loves you and your parents love you, but I don't think you realize how loved you are by this greater force, whatever, however we label that. And she was right. I had never allowed myself to even consider that I might be worthy of that kind of emotion. She said, I'm a bit confused by it because you're so loving. You can give it and you know it, but you don't receive it. And that shifted something. Just being willing to believe that I am loved was huge for me.
Mm.
Just huge. Um, so you're sort of saying about how I love myself more, how and so we're not we're not talking about the closed doors tissues event. But what does it like when what how did you get there, and what does it mean to you to love yourself more?
Yeah. So I think first of all, this summer has been key for me in slowing down, um, connection with nature. So doing things that I really enjoy, with no other intention apart from to enjoy them. So running in the mountains, walking in the mountains early in the summer mornings before my family are awake was like really, this is magical. I think I come from my parents are Christian, so they brought me up as a Christian until I was 15 when I was a man enough apparently to make a decision about whether I wanted to walk with God or not, which I didn't. But that said, there's so many universal truths to all the teachings that I've received as a kid that are coming back to me as lessons. But so yeah, love is definitely one of them. Um, so yeah, I think, like I said, there's certain things that I do for myself, holding myself to a certain standard. And then I guess the biggest way that it shows it is recognizing all the things that I'm grateful for in my life quite routinely. And those things change, but it's almost as a practice to actively acknowledge and recognize this is good about gratitude. So this is good, this is good, this is good. I'm grateful for bum bum bum. I feel love here. And I slowing down has been the key for me because then I can start to feel rather than think. So stepping out of my limited thinking, and for me, it comes, I say from my stomach, it comes from my stomach and my heart, that sort of, oh yeah, it's a knowing. I might not always be able to describe it, but it's a knowing, it's a connection. And sometimes other people will say things to me, and it will take a while to filter down. And other times it's just a knowing. But for me, you touched on it and about that universal energy, and I think a sunrise is an example. It's just incredible. Look at the colors that come from the sky, and
Yeah,
then a few hours later it's gone, and that happens every single day.
yeah.
That's a miracle for me, and I consider myself a miracle. I'm just an average miracle, by the way, as we all
I
are.
don't, I don't agree with that. I think we're all incredible miracles.
Yeah, I know, but no, well, okay. But what I'm saying is that I get that, but what I'm saying is that miracle lives within all of us. That
Yes,
that
yes.
we breathe air, we breathe something that we can't see, and we stay
Yeah,
alive.
yeah,
That we connect to each other sometimes without even speaking, and we can feel something viscerally in our body.
yeah.
That is incredible, but it's also not that incredible because it's in all of us. That's
Yes.
what I mean. It's really
Yeah,
common. Should we
yeah,
wish to connect to it or create that space or slow down enough to get away from busy work and arguments and TV, and phones to
yeah.
see what else is going on within us.
Mm. Yeah, that's incredible. And so, how do you find that internal dialogue that we all have now that for you sounded like, that I have to be perfect, it has to be perfect, it has to be perfect. How do you now talk to yourself that enables you to feel that love for you rather than,
Yeah. So I think it's real gentle language. I think once upon a time it's been really harsh. You're an idiot. You really fucked up. You messed that up. Everyone thinks you're a joke. You are a joke. So it's really angry, really loud.
Mm.
Um, Now the critical side is really, really quiet, and it's quite a challenge to catch it. But the voice that I choose to replace that with is, "You're okay. You've got this.
Mm.
You'll be okay." And that's allowed that "you'll be okay," that almost like self-trust, figuring out some really quite big challenges that I've lent into or discovered or gone back 20 years to open that emotional box on exploring, because there's an underlying belief underneath all of that noise and that story and that discomfort and fear and shame and tears is, "You're okay. You'll work it out.
Mm.
You'll
Yeah,
yeah. I'm love myself enough to know that I'll be okay. I can't see the solution, but I've got somebody here who's willing to help me,
yeah.
hold
I
my
love
hand."
that. And I love the fact that you said choose. You
Yeah,
choose to talk to yourself in that way. And I don't think many people realize they have a choice. They
yeah.
just hear that voice and assume that what it's telling them is true. But yet, actually, when we choose to have a more compassionate tone with ourselves, it just fundamentally changes how we experience things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'll quickly mention this. Well, I say quickly, but I'll mention this story because one of the biggest things that I came to realize is that I can't change past events, but I can change my perspective of them, and therefore my perspective of myself, or I can find new, yeah, opinions about myself or
Yes.
through those situations. So
Mhm.
when I was in the military, and I do talk about this a little bit, it's still really uncomfortable for lots of different reasons. But when I was in the military, we were working in a small team overseas, and we got into a firefight, and I didn't respond the way that I thought we should, or I should have, as we were taught to. And so we all made it home, but it got quite scary for me. And basically, I started to close down. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't respond how I really thought I should have. I'm missing out lots of details for lots of different reasons,
Yeah.
but some of them aren't important. And it is a little bit of an extreme example. But the point is that I judged myself for 20 plus years of being a coward or being a failure from this one incident, and
Yeah.
thought everybody did the same. Everybody knew about it. Um, and yeah, subtly and not so subtly beat myself up with it. And it
Yeah.
felt like 50 kilograms in a bag on my back. And when
Yeah.
I got to go into that and explore it, it felt like putting it to a side. So I can't change the way that I behaved or reacted or responded, better said, on that day. But I
Yeah.
can recognize that I was a 24-year-old lad who was scared for his life, who had a very normal human experience in a
Yeah.
high pressure, high stress, high risk environment.
Yeah.
And I can show that little lad so much compassion.
Yeah.
So my perspective of myself completely changes.
Yeah.
Still feels uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
you're okay.
And I think that's it, isn't it? Like discomfort isn't actually a problem, but
No.
having compassion, I think compassion and gratitude are two of the most incredible. I mean, I always think love is the most incredible emotion, but alongside that, to get to love, it's through compassion. Hello, everybody. Incredibly, unfortunately, and I'm a little bit disappointed. There were a few technical issues at the end of this conversation, and for some reason, Zoom stopped recording early. So I'm afraid that is the end of this particular episode, but I really hope you found value from it and from Ron's experience and his incredible ability or the skill that he's learnt to build his emotional resilience and be the type of father that he wants to be in this world. Maybe we'll have him on again for another time, but thank you very, very much for listening. If you want to get hold of Ron, I will put all his details in the show notes below. Thank you very much.